All right, hello all, and welcome to ERPfixers, August 2020 webcast series. My name is Jess Carson, and I am with ERPfixers. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. See, we've got a lot of people already logging in. I'm just going to go over a couple things before we get started. First off, I just wanted to say that we are doing a live Q&A at the end today with Marjorie. If you guys go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat box. If you could please send all of your questions at the bottom of the screen in the chat box, and at the very end, we will go ahead and get those questions answered for you. So let me just get Marjorie set up and we will get started. All right. Okay, awesome. Marjorie, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we'll go and get started on the first couple of slides.
Hey, Jess, hang on just 1 second.
No problem. Once again, for those of you who are just now joining us, we will be taking a live Q&A at the end. So if you guys could please go to the bottom of your screen to the chat box and submit all your questions. And then I will be reading them aloud and Marjorie will be answering them for you at the very end of this presentation.
One second, sorry.
That's okay.
Let me swap these out. There we go.
Awesome. All right, perfect. All right, guys, well, welcome. We are so excited for another round of webcasts this month. Just to get into a little bit about what we do, who ERPfixers is. So our presenter today is Marjorie Wright, and the topic is S/4HANA costing for manufacturing orders. To talk a little bit about what ERPfixers is, we connect you with SAP experts to obtain quality immediate solutions for your SAP system. We consist of thousands of SAP freelancers globally in all SAP modules who are ready to help and assist with their knowledge in SAP. We offer an online platform, SAP Optimization Assessment, Material Ledger, S/4HANA Transitional Roadmap, and Cost Transparency Reports. For more information, go to ERPfixers.com. All right, so now I'm going to introduce Marjorie. So she is the founder of Simply FICO LLC, a boutique consulting and training company specializing in SAP Finance and Controlling. She holds SAP certifications in financial accounting and management accounting for both ERP and S/4HANA. Her published works include the SAP S/4HANA Management Accounting Certification Guide, Application Associate Exam. So I'll go ahead and give it to you, Marjorie, and get started with the presentation.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks for the great intro. And oh, hang on 1 second. So Jess, I was trying to start video, but cannot because the host has stopped it. So I'll just talk. You guys will hear me in your head for a few minutes till we work on that. Again, thanks Jess for the introduction. It was really fantastic. Today, we have a pretty big agenda. My name again is Margie Wright, and thanks everyone for joining this session today. I'll preface the whole presentation with a couple of comments. Many of you know me. I have been an SAP consultant for many years, but what some of you may remember and others may just be learning, I was a cost accountant in an old life. So the topics that we're going to talk about today are always really near and dear to my heart. Things that are important to me that I think bring value to the business. So while you're scanning this agenda, you see again, we have a lot of topics to cover today. I'll just make a few comments about some housekeeping, if you will. So unless otherwise mentioned, I'm talking about an on-premise edition of HANA. We will talk about cloud a little later, but for the most part, everything I'm going to mention is about on-premise, and my demos are in a 1909 system. The other thing that I want to mention to you is feature evolution. Things change really quickly in the S4 world. I'm sure you're aware of that. So as we go through these different settings, I'll indicate which release or version the setting was made available, because as you'll see, things unfold pretty quickly here. Then the other thing to mention to you is some of these topics I know look really familiar. You're wondering, well, what's new in the content? So you may have heard things like on-the-fly target costing. That's a big topic these days that we'll definitely be touching on. So I want to point out that every time there's something new, you'll see a little red star on my slide. So that will help you remember when you look at this later, what the new features are. Okay? And in every agenda item, you can see we're going to have new things to talk about. The other thing I want to mention before we get started officially is I have an appendix where I've included, for example, a list of relevant SAP notes that you'll find interesting, a chronological list of availability of the features that I'll be talking about, just general things like that that'll help you in your quest. So let's get started. Our first topic will be production versions and cost variance. Now, some of you may be very familiar with SAP ERP, and these are not new concepts, but we have a really big audience today, and others of you may be brand new to SAP in S/4HANA, and you've never really been exposed to these before. So we need to be sure we understand these basic concepts before we apply them. So production versions are not new. Many of you who live in a process industry world are very used to these. They're basically a combination of bill of material and routing. We group them together when we make things in certain lot sizes or date ranges, for example, might determine a production version. What is new is that simplified MRP in S/4HANA requires a production version. So prior to S/4HANA, production versions were optional. In S/4HANA 1511, production versions are required. So right away, there are two new things for you to consider. And again, if you're unfamiliar with production versions, don't be too worried about it. It's just a combination of bill of material and routing. Now, you notice on this slide that I've referred to bill of material and routing as a quantity structure. So there's a costing term that's really important to understand. And I'll expand on that a little more as we go forward. So throughout the session, I might say production version, I might say BOM or routing, I might say quantity structure. From a costing perspective, they're synonymous. As you begin your migration from ERP to S/4HANA, there's a really good SAP note that I've shown you here that tells you why SAP made this change. It was for MRP, material requirements planning, that the change was made, not for costing. And again, costing is familiar with production versions. They aren't new. What's new now is that they are required. So remember, in the appendix, I have a list of all relevant SAP notes. Don't be worried about trying to jot this down now. I just want you to know that it exists, and it'll give you some advice on migrating. So that phrase I used, quantity structure, and remembering that I'm a cost accountant at heart. Quantity structure, from a costing perspective, tells me what components and what activities I need to consume when I make a product. The quantity of raw materials, the quantity of the activity type for labor or machine. That's the quantity structure. And you might be surprised to learn that costing does not own that quantity structure. Logistics does, right? It's their master data. We just leverage it to get the quantity to then later multiply by some price that we've determined. So you hear that a lot in controlling under product costing, quantity times price. So on this slide, I'm showing you the MRP4 tab and the Costing 1 tab of a material I'm going to demonstrate today. This material is Procurement Type E in-house production. So that means that production version is the only valid source of supply since 1511. Notice on the MRP4 tab, that's all about logistics. That's their data. Notice there's a little push button for production version. And I'll show you in my demo, we actually have 3 production versions behind there. Then notice on the Costing 1 tab, I have this group of data called quantity structure data. There's that phrase. And notice that I could indicate bills of material, routings, production versions. Also notice costing lot size is found there. That's really important to our quantity times price calculation to know how many we're costing. So the way this works is the Costing 1 quantity structure data is looked at first when cost estimates are calculated. If nothing is there, then the system will follow some rules that we'll talk about in a minute. But the Costing 1 tab is the cost accountant's opportunity to be specific. You might be really lucky or unlucky and have costing bombs. You would probably want them represented here as a production version, because we want to create standard costs based on that data, not the MRP4 data, for example. So we'll take a look at these in the system in just a minute in a demo. But before we look at them, let's talk about the standard cost variant. So our goal today isn't really to talk about the entire calculation of standard cost, but again, you need a little background to understand what happens here. So when we create a standard cost estimate, if there is more than one quantity structure for the material within a plant, well, someone has to decide which one we use. If we're creating a single material cost estimate using CK11N, the user has the opportunity to actually enter the quantity structure. If the user makes no entry there, then the system looks at Costing 1 first. If the system finds no entry there, then it looks at the standard cost variant. So you see a little screenshot here, PYC1, that's the standard cost variant in S4HANA. In ERP, we called it PPC1. Things sort of got renamed in S4. Notice that I've highlighted the quantity structure control and the date control settings. Behind the quantity structure control, we create some rules about which production version, which BOM, which routing we want to use for costing. And whatever master data is found there has to adhere to date control. It has to be valid on the dates we've specified in date control. Now, if we're using CK40N, mass costing, we want to do a whole plant or a whole company code. Well, the user does not have the opportunity to enter specific quantity structures there. That would be kind of crazy, right? Kind of silly. So the system will look first at Costing 1 and see if we've been specific. If it finds nothing there, then it will apply the quantity structure control that we've configured. So let's take a look at this master data so far. This is my material, finished good 126 in plant 1710. You can see that it's procurement type E on the MRP2 tab, meaning in-house production. On MRP4, notice the production indicator is selected. And when I click the details of each version, I see that lot size is important. Version 1 up to 100. Use routing group counter 1, a certain way to make the product. Production version 2 is from a lot size of 101 to infinity, and it uses a different routing, group counter 2. Then thirdly, there's a rework production version. I think this one's really interesting, and it uses a totally different routing and bill of material. So 3 options from an MRP point of view. Let's look at Costing 1. This is the quantity structure group box that I mentioned, and you can see we've made no specific selections here. We have specified the costing lot size is 100, but we haven't named a production version specifically. On the Costing To tab, if I take a look at this standard cost estimate detail, I want to point out, first of all, let's make this a little wider. On the left-hand side, this is my costing structure. Remember, I'm an old cost accountant, so I love to look at this. You can see I need 100 of every material to make 100 pieces of the pump. It's pretty simple. The costing variant used was PYC1. I get that from the Costing Data tab, and the lot size was 100. On the Quantity Structure tab, I see exactly which production version, because remember we had 3. Version 1 was selected. And by the way, this little blue information icon is super helpful. It gives me a link to everything involved in this calculation. And I want to show you the costing variant. Now I know sometimes user authorization stops us here. Here's the quantity structure control. We have a rule, if you will, for selecting a BOM, a rule for selecting a routing, and these are in the configuration menu. It's a good idea to always check the plant push button. I always forget that. You can see I should have gone there first because the rules, if you will, could be different by each plant. Here's also the date control setting where we would indicate the validity period that the master record has to meet. Now, let's take a look at the cost tab. You can see that this view is based on a costing lot size of 100 and the cost of goods manufactured is $12,197. So keep that in your memory because we're going to be comparing to that value as we look at the production order cost. So this is our standard cost. Now, for manufacturing orders, there are costing variants that control the valuation here as well. They are not the same as the standard cost variant. They're quite different. We have one for the plan calculation. You can see it's PYG1 here. And we have one for the actual calculation, PYG2. This is not new. It's been this way forever. In configuration, these are assigned to the logistics order type. And I'll just give you a reminder here that plan does not equal standard. You'll see in my demo in a minute where mine does not, nor should it. Well, I shouldn't say should it. I should just say it can and often is different. Things could change since the standard was calculated. I'm applying a different rule here, a different costing variant. Each of these costing variants for orders does not require quantity structure control. You can see the little snapshot of PYG1 here. There's a costing type and evaluation variant, meaning where do I get the prices? But the quantity structure comes from the order itself. When the order is created, production has a plan for how they're going to make it. When actual reporting occurs, something quite different could happen. So at the order level, the quantity structure comes from the order itself. So 2 for orders, 1 for standard. They can all 3 differ. When these orders are created, either MRP runs or a user manually enters the material, the plant, the quantity we're going to make, and the beginning or ending dates, depending on scheduling. And the system goes to work and selects the production version that should be used and selects the costing variants for plan and actual from the order type configuration. We'll take a look at my specific orders in a demo shortly, but here I've given you the master data tab of a production order. And notice the production version number is displayed here, as is the routing and the bill of material that was selected. So remember when I showed you my standard cost, it was based on production version 1 as well. But since the time that standard was created and the time this order was created, well, that production version could have been changed. So things can be quite different on the order as compared to standard. Always keep that in mind. So now that we have those basics behind us, just kind of a little bit of level setting, let's talk about what happens when plan cost is calculated for an order. So when the manufacturing order is saved, our plan costing variant goes to work and does the math. It looks at the quantity structure of the order. It looks at the valuation variant of the costing variant, quantity times price, right? To look ahead a little bit at period and close, this would equate to target cost version 1. And if you're unfamiliar with that phrase, target cost version, I'm going to explain it a little later in our time together today. For now, I'll just say it means measure what I really spent against what I planned to spend on this order. So this process continues to be true in S/4HANA. This has not changed. What has changed is now we have this feature called a plan category. So since 1709, when production orders are saved, that plan cost is saved as plan ord 01, production order planned cost. So why would we need to save this plan value? What would be like so significant about this? Let me explain. Since 1610, SAP has delivered ACDOCP. I know we talk all the time about ACDOC-A, so popular, right? Well, ACDOCP has the same structure, but it holds plan data. Remember my comment earlier about the evolution of features by version or release? You can see first came the table, ACDOCP in 1610. Then came the ability to save the plan order cost estimate in said table. So we'll see this over and over again today, how with each release, something new is available. Somebody at SAP knows where we're going with this, right? I wish they'd tell me. So some unique things about this table. We have information at the operation level. Pretty amazing. Kind of like an itemization. Cost accountants have dreamed for that for a long time. I'll show you what I mean by order operation date in my next slide and in my demo. Something to keep in mind, if orders are recosted, let's say that we changed the production version on an order after it had been saved. Well, that would mean valuation would differ. There's a process to revalue that order for plan cost. Well, if we run that program to revalue orders, ACDOCP gets updated. It's pretty amazing. ACDOCP is the basis for actual plan comparisons in 2 new Fiori apps, and I'll show you these in slides and in demos today. I'm pretty excited about both of them. So, a new table, and this detail from planning at the order level gets updated there. For now, here's a screenshot of what it looks like. And again, I'm going to show you this in a demo for both of my orders today. So I'll say that this layout that you're looking at throughout the session is something that I created just to my liking. Remember that ACDOCP has the same structure as ACDOC-A, so there are several hundred fields available there. Notice that in this slide, I'm looking at my order that ends in 41. And I've filtered on plan category. I'm just going to say 1. Notice the operation column, and I was a little short-sighted in this screenshot. I only showed 1 operation, but you'll see more in the demo. They're all there, trust me. Then I want to draw your attention to this posting date. In a demo today, I'll show you precisely where that comes from. It's the plan date of the operation on the order. Then notice the 3 currency columns. And I'm only showing 3 here, and I'm only going to focus on company code currency. It's the easiest one to speak to today. So notice 12,008 US dollars for the plan cost, total plan cost of this order. I've summed it up here. So kind of jot down that number because we're going to see it again. This is order plan, category 1, I'm going to call it, at 12,008. Now, where we use this data is in the 2 new Fiori apps that I mentioned. So these 2 read from ACDOCP by plan category. And again, I'll have a little demo of this later in the session, but just for now, notice that my plan cost in the Analyze Cost by Work Center app is 12,008. Pretty cool, right? I like it when things tie off. Notice in each app, Production Cost Analysis on the left and Analyze Cost by Work Center on the right, I have a filter for plan category. That's kind of important now. You can see here also the role you need to have these apps in Fiori. So these are nice, and I'm actually really excited about both of them. You'll see in a demo coming up how I love them. But what about our old faves? What about the KKBC transactions, right? I'm a big fan of those as well. Well, we have a Fiori app for that, Analyze Order on the left, and we still have our GUI transaction for that, Analyze Order on the right. These still read from what I'm going to call the legacy tables. And that legacy table structure is really complicated. If anyone has ever tried to dig into it, to report on it, it's pretty hard. In the appendix, I have a list of those tables for you, and I'll give you some advice on them when we get there. Notice also, I've shown the drop down for target cost version because I brought that up a little earlier in the discussion. So target cost version is still alive and well, and it still means what it always did. And I'll explain why the term target is used kind of loosely. These are still available. They will run faster on S/4HANA, but we won't have the benefit of the saved data in ACDOCP. We're still digging through all of the legacy details, if you will. So let's take a look at my demo. This is my order ending in 41. You see we're making 100 pieces and we've made none so far. On the Control tab, here are my 2 costing variants. One for plan, one for actual. And on the Master Data tab, we can see that production version 1 was used and group counter 1 was the routing. So let's take a look at KKBC. Let's start there because that's something most of us are familiar with. Again, here's my drop down for target cost version. I'm going to leave it on 0 and execute. And there is no target cost because there is no goods receipt. Nothing changed there. If I switch over to the cost trend view, here's my plan cost based on the plan cost variant. And you notice there's a little variance already as compared to standard at the bottom. But again, plan and standard are not necessarily the same thing. That's okay. Now, in ACDOCP, here is my order 41, and I'm looking at plan category 1. Here's my company code currency 12,008. Again, I like it when things tie off. Here's my column for operation. Now you can see operation 20. We could scroll down and see the other operations as well. If I swap out my filter, getting a little ahead of myself, but that's okay, I think. If we, let's put that category back. If we take a look at category 2, which is our next topic, I just want you to notice that there is another calculation here. And it's a very different value, 12,197. This is our quote unquote target. We didn't see a target value in KKBC because no goods receipt has occurred. Now, over here in Analyze Cost by Work Center, Fiori app, here's the filter for plan category. And you can see that I've included a filter for my order number. I have no actual cost yet. I do have plan cost. I have no target cost, even though you've seen a preview of that. I have no goods receipt for this order. And again, I can change my filter here to pick up plan or target. They won't be any different right now for this order because there's no order activity yet. So we've seen the order, 100 pieces, no goods receipt. We've seen the standard cost, 12,197. We've seen ACDOCP with plan and standard cost. And we've seen the KKBC type of report with plan only, no target yet, even though that calculation exists. We haven't had a goods receipt, therefore, there's nothing to calculate. That continues to be true in the information system. So let's take a look at this magical target cost. Now, I have sort of a disclaimer here about the use of the word target. So you have to take the meaning of the word within the context of the component. Target cost means something different in cost center accounting as compared to order accounting. So it's a contextual definition. Target cost versions are defined in customizing under the period and close activities for orders. So when we say at target, we need to know which target cost version we're talking about. You can see here a screenshot of version 0. It's the only one that really matters, truthfully, because it's the only one that posts to financial accounting, always and forever. So notice the target cost group box at the bottom of the screen. We say use the current standard cost estimate. That's good because we want to measure what we actually spent to make the product against its current standard, against what the inventory is worth. So in this case, target equals standard, right? But if I were looking at target cost version 1, which I've mentioned earlier, it would say target cost is the plan cost, because there I want to measure order plan to order actual. And we can calculate that and we can report on it, but it doesn't post to financial accounting. It's just for information. So be cautious about your use of the word target is my advice. Now, target costing. Here's where we're going to see a big change. First, remember that this was calculated whenever we had a goods receipt. All those KKBC reports, target cost didn't sit out there somewhere in a table waiting to be called. It was a calculation, which is why those reports have always been so slow. Now, I continue to use those reports, still calculating. My efficiency improves because of the speed of the HANA database, but it's still a calculation. Now, since 1809, again, the evolution of the feature, Target cost is calculated and saved when the order is saved. It goes to ACDOCP, right? It uses the quantity structure and prices of the standard cost estimate because that's what I'm measuring against. It would equate to target cost version 0. Even though I have this calculation in ACDOCP, it won't appear in reports until I have a goods receipt. There's nothing to measure against until I make something. So this plan category 2, referred to as production order standard cost, new with 1809. So let's see how the Universal Journal ACDOCP gets updated. Again, same structure as ACDOC-A, but I'm only putting plan data here. It'll be saved as category Plan Ord 02. The costing type configuration determines the save as date, and that's typically the first day of the next period, always what SAP recommended. Just like my previous category, if I recost the order, the table will get updated, and this will be the basis for comparison in the 2 new Fiori apps. So in this example, this is the category 2 calculation. It's for a different order. It's for order number 42. And I have a separate order for this example because I wanted a goods receipt. And I also wanted a different production version. I wanted a little variety. I'll walk you through that in a minute. So you can see the column for operation. You can see the column for posting date, and that is reading from the costing type. That's typically the save as date on the costing type. There's my company code currency, 24,334 US dollars. So you know my quantity is different, right, than my previous example. Something else might be a little different as well. Just like the first example, this information can be analyzed in the 2 new Fiori apps, the production cost analysis and the analyzed costs by work center. Just like my previous example, I can still use KKBC. And there I would select the appropriate target cost version to get the result that I expect. So let's take a look at the demo. So order number 42, same material, 200 pieces, and we delivered 200 pieces this time. Now, I know this basic date is 9/1, but that's not the same as the saved on date. If we look at the operations, we have 4 operations with a planned start date of August 31st. We'll see that in ACDOCP. On the control tab, here are my costing variants, plan and actual. And on the master data tab, here is my production version. You can see it's a different routing, number 2 group counter. This time, let's look at ACDOCP first. So order number 42, category 2, posting date is the costing type date. Company code currency, 24,334 for my target. If I change this filter to be category 1, the order plan cost. Again, notice the posting date here comes from the operation plan date. Now, let's look at this production cost analysis. First, I want you to note that this is in euro, not US dollar. This is, to me, kind of a cross between KUIS and KKBC. I like this report a lot. In my filters at the top of the screen, you notice I have it filtered on production order standard. And I could toggle over to the Work Center report, but I had it open already in the background. So let's take a look here. This is US dollar. And I like the graphics here. I can see actual compared to plan in color. In this example, I actually have some actual cost. And down below in the list section of the report, I can see target because there is a goods receipt. I can see plan, and I can see I'm way below on actual so far, right? So again, I like these new apps a lot. We'll talk about them again a little later today. So to review this, we had order number ending in 42, a different production version, version 2. The order quantity was 200, the delivered quantity was 200. You can see the extended standard here didn't tie to plan or to nor target. Well, that's because my extended standard included some lot dependent costs that should not be repeated. I simply did the math, right? Once I subtract those, I tie nicely. And again, notice that ACDOCP-Plan Ord 1 ties to KKBC plan, and Plan Ord 2 ACDOCP ties to KKBC target. Again, I have target cost in the information system because there was a goods receipt. So let's look at the category setting, and everything in this section is new. So the whole section gets a red star. To set up these categories is super easy because they come standard delivered. I'll point this out in my demo. Notice where this is in the customizing menu. It's pretty high up under general controlling. Truthfully, I was a little surprised at that. I expected it to be more in the order section. So this sort of makes me think of plan version config. And tuck that away. You'll see where I'm going with that in a minute. So standard delivered, we have a category and an option to maintain category for production orders. I know you notice project management there as well. I'm focused on orders today. Again, standard delivered content. These were my two plan categories that you saw me demo today. And notice I've highlighted the word change, but notice I've also highlighted that every option is grayed out, so we get no choice about this. SAP controls this. All we can really change is the description. So this is the category setting, and this is the maintenance of category setting. So again, notice even though I'm in change view, the radio buttons are grayed out. I have no choice here other than description. So let's compare this category to the target cost version. Again, I've mentioned this several times. I want to be really clear on this. We still need target cost versions for period end variance calculation and settlement. Our valuation should align. Plan Ord 1 should be the same as target cost version 1. Plan Ord 2 should be the same as target cost version 0. So OKV6 is alive and well. The new thing is the category. And again, those come standard delivered. We shouldn't need to change those. We can't change those. So let's take a look at this. Again, notice how high up in the controlling menu this resides. Under controlling, general controlling planning. Again, it's reminiscent to me of plan version. Here's the category setting. Pretend you only see O1 and O2. I'll talk about these others a little later. And you'll notice that when I select one, I can't change anything. SAP is controlling this. I can only change the description. And I did, by the way, maintain these descriptions to be nice and neat. So let's take a look at the category for production order setting. And again, you'll notice that everything is grayed out. I'm not allowed to make changes here. SAP is controlling this. Now, there was a little bit of chatter about these not being copied correctly from client 0. So in the SAP notes that I have in the appendix, one of them addresses that. So if you've had that experience, I encourage you to read the SAP note for some help. So we have the basics of the big things that changed, right? ACDOCP, Category 1, Category 2, we know the 2 new Fiori apps use that. Let's talk about what else might be coming. Now, I'll be frank with you, I don't have a crystal ball, and you know, Release 2020 is coming out next month, so we'll find out for sure what our options are then. But just to remind you of the evolution of the product. For real-time production controlling, we've had event-based overhead since 1610. We could calculate overhead with overhead costing sheets in real time. We had to activate a business function for that to work. Next, notice that I'm mentioning Cloud 1902 and Cloud 2005. What we've seen happen repeatedly is that features are deployed in the cloud before they come to on-premise. So event-based WIP has been available since Cloud 1902, and event-based production variants has been available since Cloud 2005. So I won't be surprised if these make their way to on-premise. I'm really curious to see event-based production variants because we know that the status of the cost object determines what happens, right? And you can see here there's a Fiori app to support both of these if we're in the cloud. As far as ACDOCP goes, I sort of feel about this table the way I felt about extension ledgers. You guys remember when those were deployed? And truthfully, I had to scratch my head a lot to figure out why I would ever use an extension ledger. Well, now we know that that's been expanded to include predictive accounting. So SAP knew where they were headed all along. I just had to be patient. So I think the same evolution is going to happen to ACDOCP based on history and based on what I see. Right now, object-based planning, our order, is working well. But if you look at these settings, notice I've used the drop-down here. There's capability for period-based planning as well. So I think we're going to see this expand. The best advice I can give you on staying current in what's coming is to follow roadmaps.sap.com. The way I like to use it, I go to financial planning and analysis, S/4HANA, and then I start looking for product costing. And you can see here, these are all relative to cloud. I found nothing new there for us yet for on-premise, but you know, September's coming. Like this time next month, we'll all have some new things to learn. So we've talked about plan categories as being new, 2 new Fiori apps that leverage ACDOCP. Let me just remind you of a few things in the appendix. This is my list of SAP notes that will help you. This is my sort of chronological list of when these features were available in the on-premise edition by version. So again, you can see the evolution. Then a little reminder of my demo data. If you were trying to keep up with the math, no worries, it's all here for you. You can prove it all out when we're done. Regarding those legacy tables that I mentioned, these are the main tables that have been used in product costing and cost object controlling forever. it's a lot of work, and we never really get the result we want, not like what we see in ACDOCP by operation. Our best hope was to check the right line items box on the variance key, and then after settlement, at least we had a record of the target, right? But it was kind of complicated. Comparing that with ACDOCP-Plan line items, remember that we have the category, the operation. So in a sense, we have an itemization here in multiple currency. These new apps that I've introduced, I really like the production cost analysis app. Always keep in mind, these are reading from ACDOCP. To me, it sort of combines CUIS, which we need, the order selection report, and KKBC. I didn't have time today to fully demonstrate this, but we can branch from these line items in production cost analysis to, you can see here, an example of order cost detail, or like KKBC. Also remember that the Analyze Cost by Work Center Operation app includes a graphical and a list output. So I didn't have a lot of actual data in my demo today to really show you the power of this. And also remember that this app filters by plan category as well. So as always, I thank you for your time and attention, and I hope you feel more confident in your knowledge on these topics. And at this point, Jess, I think we'll take some questions. Jess, I see your comment. Hang on one second, I'm working on it. So Jess, I'm sorry, I don't see a way to unmute you. Can you help me with that, please? We do have a couple of questions here already. And Jess, I don't have a panelist, I have participants. Sorry guys, the wonders of Zoom, of sharing Zoom. So guys, bear with me for just a moment. I'm an SAP consultant, not a Zoom guru. I guess I'll try to answer some of these questions that I see popping up. Yeah, very good. So a question that came up is, will this session be available? Yes, the sessions are recorded and you will be available to, it'll be possible for you to have access to it. So the recording will be shared. The main differences between production and process orders, this is a really good question and kind of goes back to my comment about level setting. So production orders use bills of material and routings. Process orders typically use recipes, but guess what? Recipes use bills of material and routing. So they just require different master data. And we find typically that process industries use process orders, continuous manufacturing, and production orders are used more by discrete industries. Another question that I see is, are target cost versions no longer required? No, that's not true. We still need target cost versions, as I indicated. Those play a role in period end processing. Another good question is CO production orders instead of a PP production order. So yes, I have seen that used. Typically, my best example was a publishing industry where all of the manufacturing was really handled in a 3PL system, but we needed to account for the cost in SAP, and CO orders were used in that case. Good question. Another good question, someone's asking, where can they find the calculation methods for on the fly? Again, I'll direct you to the SAP Notes in my appendix for help there. Really good questions, guys. Also, any questions that we missed today, we will provide those answers along with the recorded session. Another great question, I think we have time for one or two more. Someone is saying that in their Fiori apps, they don't see anything in the drop down for category. So that typically happens when we do not have a description for the category. So my advice would be check the description and make sure that it's complete. A few more moments of questions. So a great question being asked about additional SAP training and learning. So my first advice would be definitely stay connected to ERPfixers and follow the blogs that are posted there. These days, there are a lot of online virtual events that are free. So whenever you have the opportunity, take advantage. So thank you guys so much again for your time and attention today. We appreciate your patience with my lack of Zoom skills. Thank you so very much. Thanks for attending.